How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Okay, so today we're going to try to provide some updates on what we have with the coronavirus, the COVID-19, how it's affecting our jails and prisons. We're going to keep the story moving. We have a lot of great articles that you can find on Corrections One, so we're going to kind of read through this. But here's the cool thing. Now, I know we have, as usual, Russ Hamilton, my boy, and we're going to introduce him again shortly. But we also have Mark Chamberlain. I'm going to have him introduce himself because he has a lot of titles and a lot of accomplishments, and I know for a fact I'm going to mess up the titles, I'm going to mess up the accomplishments, so I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Mark first. So Mark, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Not a problem, Anthony. Thank you, and thanks for having me on. My name is Mark Chamberlain. I'm presently the Director of Corrections Content for Lexipol. Lexipol, if you're not familiar, is an agency or a company that provides policies to jails, police departments, fire departments, juvenile probation, and probation departments throughout the country. So we focus on policy. We also focus on policy training. And we are aligned with Corrections One. That's one of our products that we put out. But before I joined Lexipol, I was the Chief Deputy of Corrections in Garland County, Arkansas, in Hot Springs. I did that for about 4 years, built a brand new jail there, the only direct supervision jail in the state. The only jail in the state that has programs and educational programs, drug rehab, things like that. Really progressive jail in that state, something I'm very proud of. Prior to that, in my past life, I worked for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office in West Palm Beach, Florida for 26 years. Started off there as a corrections deputy, worked my way through the ranks, and retired as a facility commander / captain. So I've been in corrections for 35 years now. I hate to admit that.
I'm just a rookie compared to you guys. I only have 18. All right, Russ, go ahead, Russ. Let's talk about this career that just does not end for you either.
Absolutely. My name is Russ Hamilton. I started my career way back in 1989 with California Department of Corrections. I did 27 years with them, and then after that 27 years, I retired, but then I went back to work for a small juvenile detention facility in Northern California. Now I spend most of my time working on my own concern, which is called Keepers of Chaos. That's with a K. Over on Facebook, where I provide training, content, and fellowship with anyone involved in corrections whatsoever. And I also spend a lot of time doing some content and videos with Tier Talk for Anthony Gangi.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Russ.
Well, thank you, Anthony.
I would also, before we go to a sponsor and come back to talk about COVID-19, I would also like to dedicate this episode to an officer out of Washington, a correctional officer who died on Wednesday from COVID-19. Gentleman's name was Kenneth Moore. He was a DC native. He was a correctional officer at the Department of Youth and Rehabilitative Services. And just a little, again, this article comes from Corrections One. He was a longtime and dedicated district employee. Mr. Moore proudly served DYRS and youth committed to the agency as a youth development representative for 16 years. The district had previously announced that a juvenile inmate had tested positive for COVID-19. As a result, several incarcerated youths and COs were quarantined. We share our deepest condolences with his family and loved ones, and that comes from the mayor. As of Thursday, the district reported a total of 653 COVID-19 cases. It's sad. It really is. It's horrible. Guys, we're going to go to our sponsors. We're going to come back. We are going to discuss some updates on COVID-19 and explore the article that Mark Chamberlain wrote that could be found on Corrections One. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stand by for our sponsor, and we come back, COVID-19.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it. It's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. All right, guys, and we're back. All right, trying to keep it a little bit lively here. But again, if you guys aren't taking this serious by now, I don't know what you're doing. This is real. Trust me, it's hitting almost every facility. Every time you wake up, there's something new that's happening at another facility. More people are coming back positive. I just got the numbers back from Rikers Island. Now, by the way, Rikers Island is the biggest affected so far in the country. New York is the center of it all. And I just want to go ahead and read those numbers off. Elias Husamaddin is leading the way and making sure those officers are protected. Me and Russ had a show with him once before. He is an amazing individual. But I want to read a brief article real quick. It takes 2 seconds, but let me show you how dangerous this is, okay, guys? For those that aren't taking serious, listen to this. Coronavirus continues to spread in New York City jails despite dwindling inmate population. Now, mind you, remember now, there's been talks across the country to drop that population. So New York has led the way with almost changing their numbers to, I think it was 5,000 down to 4,000 and change. So about 900 some odd inmates in the course of 2 weeks, thinking that, okay, the numbers, if we drop those inmates numbers, you won't see the numbers for the coronavirus or the COVID-19 go up. Well, to be more specific, the jail population dropped from 5,557 on March 16th to 4,563 on April 2nd. But with that said, this is going to be the numbers now for the coronavirus positive test. But by Thursday morning, the number of people in custody who tested positive for COVID-19 jumped from 184 to 231, officials said. And the number of Department of Corrections staffers has risen from 169 to 223. Hey, Mark, how does that make you feel right now? What are you thinking?
Well, it's definitely kind of predictable. I mean, we kind of knew this was coming when it first started in the community. We knew eventually it was going to hit our jails. There's just no way around it. I mean, you don't know who's infected, who's got the virus, who doesn't. Not everybody is symptomatic. That's one of the huge challenges with this thing. One of the things we recommended was, screening people when they come in through intake. We should always do a medical screening as soon as possible in intake, but start asking questions. Anybody in your family been exposed to this? Where have you traveled? What about anybody in your family? Where have they traveled lately? Anybody been overseas? Things of that nature. We also advocate, do a quick temperature check on them with the infrared touchless thing. And that's not just for your inmates. That's probably also for your staff. I mean, it's going to be really, really difficult for folks working in our nation's jails to get ahead of this thing, because it's just that's where people congregate. Social distancing. Come on, you can't socially distance in a jail. We all know that. I mean, it's next to impossible. Most of our jails are full. Rikers Island did the right thing and try and, create some space, but it hasn't stopped the flow. You're still going to get people coming in your facility around the clock. You got to do your level best to try and screen them out and then segregate them from your regular inmates to try and, at least contain that spread, mitigate it to the best of your ability. And even that's challenging because symptoms may not show up for 14 days or what the experts are telling us. So it's really the biggest challenge, I think, and certainly in my time in corrections and probably in the history of American corrections is this thing. It's really, really has a potential to get completely out of hand. And it's already, New York's a great example of what's going on out there right now.
Well, I'll tell you something, Mark. You hit everything right on the spot, because literally there are some concerns when it comes to trying your best to make sure you prevent the possible entry of this thing. But unfortunately, you're just so limited as to what you can do. And again, you talked about social distancing, but again, within the parameters of a prison or a jail. And Russ, I got to forward this to you, but do you feel at this point, that prison and jails are just kind of an afterthought? Like, we had the community, everybody was jumping on those resources, but maybe it took one of us to say, well, hold on, guys. there's a big wildfire if it spreads into the prison, and all of a sudden now that's where we're at.
You know, I can only relate really to what different people are telling me. As you know, because of Keepers of Chaos and your venue and a lot of the other forums that I visit and the people that I talk to, there seems to be a really big concern. I mean, even in the bigger prison systems, that we just haven't had the leadership or the knowledge to be attacking things and trying to keep staff safe. We went through a big thing, as you know, last week where we were talking about, you know, to mask or not to mask. And I had officers tell me that they were threatened with being disciplined if they wore a mask. And now this week we're in an entirely new scenario where now it appears that Centers for Disease Control is going to announce that everyone should be wearing a mask of some type, even if it's not a manufactured one. So not only has that part of the leadership, it appears, somewhat failed. Of course, not everywhere. There are places where this is not the case. But I'm hearing things about you know, staff where there's still, or not staff, but where there's entrances in buildings and facilities now where they're still not taking people's temperatures. They're still not getting out there, and they're not asking people if they're manifesting any symptoms. So if that's the case, if that's still happening, and in those cases, more specifically at some county level jails, I don't know where the leadership is or where the leadership is going to take some of these institutions. Of course, not all of them, but it appears that they're you know, probably headed for some much more rockier roads ahead, if indeed this is the case of the things that I'm being told in these forums.
Well, remember, I had the wives on, you know, and they pretty much said, like, this is where they feel the department is failing. And she goes, if our husbands can't speak because, you know, their hands are tied, now the families are starting to speak. As I'm talking to you about the wives of New York, I'm getting emails from Michigan. The wives from Michigan now saw the video that we did from the wives in New York and like, hey, can you put us on now? Because we're going through the same concerns. And when it comes to the mask, now I want to make sure people realize something. We explained when we were in limited supply how the N95 should be used. It's something to go right onto the threat. If they're symptomatic, then obviously you protect yourself. And that's still not going to change. You know, if you're limited with supplies and you have that N95 and, you know, you got to go on the person that has the symptoms. I mean, that's, and then if you have it for yourself. But the reason why now, as I guess we're getting more masks, hopefully, eventually, they want us to wear masks because it also protects us from putting our hands on our face.
Right.
You know, because we're used to touching. But I do want to mention something that Michigan is doing. And then I'm going to go to Mark and get Mark's thoughts first. But Michigan prisons now requiring all COs and inmates to wear masks. The mask requirement will apply across the board, regardless of whether a facility has been touched by COVID-19. Again, this comes from Corrections 1. So out of Detroit, by the end of next week, as soon as enough inventory arrives for all 38,000 Michigan prisoners and thousands of prison staffers to be given 3 free masks each, mask wearing will be mandatory at Michigan Department of Corrections. But here's the cool thing, guys. The mask is being made in the facilities.
Okay.
The inmates are making the mask. And it says, as of Thursday, this is in Michigan, 158 inmates and 26 correction staffs have contracted a coronavirus, which has reached 9 of the department's 29 facilities. The mask requirements will apply across the board, regardless of whether the facility has been touched by the virus or not. While most in-person visits are prohibited during this crisis, contractors or laborers working on site at prison facilities will also be given masks. And then as I scroll down, I just want to make sure I read, because they're creating the mask on site, and I want to go over the Michigan State Industry inmate workers also produce the state license plates. They're the ones that are going to be producing the mask. They also help to make soap and cleaning supplies, and they're ramping up production. The effort started last week and is producing 8,000 to 10,000 masks a day. So it's being made within the prison. So Mark, let me ask you a question, because I do want to explore your article in a little bit too. I want to give some current events and then really explore the preventive measures that you wrote in this great article of yours. But what do you think about, one, you know, having those inmates make the mask if we have the facilities to do that and the means to do that? But here's the other thing. How do you feel about staff and inmates wearing masks?
I mean, the more prevention, the more mitigation you can get ahead of this on this thing, then by all means, that doesn't hurt at all. You could sit there and say, well, you know, inmates can disguise themselves, they can commit assaults, they can do this, they can do that. You know, they're just afraid of this thing as we are. Let's face it. They have concerns for their families. They have concerns for themselves, and hopefully, they're acting accordingly. But I think it's a great idea, and I think any state that has a prison industry type program or a jail industry type program should probably jump right on board, do what Michigan's doing. It certainly can't hurt. And even if you make too many masks, right now or as of today, like you said earlier, it's being recommended that everybody in this country wear a mask of some sort. So absolutely, I think it's a great idea.
Now, as we've evolved, obviously, and this becomes more serious, me and Russ have had this discussion, and I believe we were consistent with always protecting the officers, but making sure that we had limited resources, that we were strategic in how we dealt with those limited resources. But Russ, if we are given a supply that we can kind of, really maintain, would you recommend masks be given to both the officers and the inmates at this point?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of good reasons for supplying them on both sides. Mark brought up the security issue with regards to, potentially them disguising themselves. That's probably true. I feel like we would just have to maybe work a little bit harder to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I think one of the good things is that if inmates feel that they have some of the power back and that they can take a proactive measure by putting a mask or something on, if that takes some of the tension out of the units, out of the yards, out of the day rooms, or wherever these inmates are, that's probably a net plus on our side. Because, this fight is, it's not going to be just about the virus. It's going to be a mental fight too, because so much of this fight involves fear, and it's fear of the unknown. If you manage to give a little bit of that power back, where some of that fear can be subsided and, mitigated some, I think that staff and inmates benefit alike.
Yeah, and I do feel that we have to really make an effort to protect staff as best we can. Again, nothing's 100%, so we have the preventive measures as doing those scannings at the beginning. If we have masks and they want to wear masks, let them wear the mask. I think at this point you may even enforce that because, again, stops people from touching their mouth. Right. 12 Miami-Dade County COs test positive for COVID-19, and it says officials said nearly 100 correctional officers have been tested through test sites for first responders. So real quick, 12 Miami-Dade correction employees have been tested positive for the coronavirus. If I remember correctly, I think Miami-Dade was one of the first facilities that were affected in Florida for the coronavirus. So as you can see, their numbers are definitely growing. But with that said, with the evolution and trying our best to do preventive measures, I've been doing a lot of reading to see okay, so these states are having it, right? So the states that haven't gone through it, they should really be looking at the states that are to try to see if there's some measures or some consistency. And we could discuss that now because actually some of it's going to come from Mark's article. But one of the things I noticed that Virginia is doing is in the dorm settings where you have inmates sleeping, they're telling the inmates to sleep feet to toe. So they're not breathing on each other. And I don't know if a lot of people have thought that far, but I thought that was a great idea. I think that's something that you may want to implement immediately, especially in a dorm setting. Again, within the parameters we have, I wish we could isolate everyone, but we can't. So just something as simple as feet to head. I was like, wow, that's preventive. I'm just hoping that people are reading what other states are doing. But Mark, you listed some preventive measures in your article, which by the way was a very well-written article. Me and Russ had a chance to really read it. And it's very informative because obviously as we're going through it, I think your article kind of connects to what people are doing, but then also some suggestions as what maybe they could do to make it better. So if we could break down your article, what's the first topic you discussed within the COVID preparation or prevention?
First thing that I tackled was doing that screening of your inmates as they're coming in. We already talked about that. Next thing is, you really got to take a look at your programs, including visitation, and that's a tough one. We don't want to deprive our inmates of visiting time with their families and loved ones and things like that, but desperate times, desperate measures. I advocate just cancel your visitation until further notice. Even if you do video visitation, that's still an area of your facility, even if it's off-site. That's still someplace that people are going to congregate. People are going to share the phones and things like that. It's just another area that you're going to have to clean constantly. And one of my biggest fears with this whole COVID-19 thing is the effect on staff. These folks are quarantined at home. It's going to be devastating to your staffing levels. It's not like, as we know in corrections, it's not like hey, that dorm can go unsupervised for a day. Like on the street cops, they can kind of share a zone or things like that. We can't do that in corrections. We've got posts, we've got to man them. And the devastation to our staffing levels is really a huge concern. So you got to kind of keep that in the forefront and think about, how can I get by with a maybe even a decimated staff? So visitation is one thing. By all means, just stop doing it for the time being. Maybe you want to increase your inmate postage a week. Maybe you want to increase phone times. Maybe if the phones went off at 10 o'clock, maybe leave them on until midnight and, turn them on earlier in the morning. Let your inmates, maintain those family ties and things like that. Give them a couple more stamped envelopes a week. That's cheap. Things of that nature to try and compensate for the actual lack of visitation. Or if, there's some vendors out there that will allow visits by FaceTime and things like that, that's another option for jail administrators. Even legal visits right now, which, we can't trample on inmates' constitutional rights. If they want to talk to their attorneys or their attorneys want to talk to them, we've got to make those arrangements. But right now, everybody's pretty much, I don't want to use the word lockdown because that means something different to you and I and Russ than it does the rest of the world. We're in isolation or we're in safer at home or whatever you're calling it. Your attorneys don't want to come to your jails right now, folks. I'm telling you that right now. None of your professional visitors want to be there. It's probably the last place they want to be, nor are they they be out in public unless it's absolutely necessary. Along that same line is, a lot of courts across the country are shutting down. Or they're just doing the bare minimum, maybe first appearance, maybe arraignments. Trials have all been suspended. Court dates are being put off for months. Well, that's going to have a huge impact on our jail populations. That's what stabilizes our jail system is inmates going through. And, most jails, you book and release basically about the same number of people every day, and it keeps that population static. Well, when they're not going to court anymore, they're not going to start getting released now. So that's another reason why, Rikers Island did the right thing and cut that population down in preparation for what may come. So just another thing for folks to be thinking about. If your courts are shut down, can you do video court? Can you do video arraignment? Do you actually have to put an inmate in a car and then drive him to the courthouse and come back and sanitize the vehicle? There's so many layers into this thing that hopefully we can get ahead of it and, with some proactive measures. But there's definitely, those are some of the things that we talked about in the article. Stop visitation, maybe legal visits can be curtailed, and think about the impacts of courts and other ways for you to be able to do court or hold court, even if it's a Skype meeting, even if it's like we're doing right now, a Zoom meeting. Is that constitutionally okay? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but again, desperate times, desperate measures. So just a few of the things that we kicked around.
Well, the only thing is, I know that there's an immediate push to get, I guess they're working on jails and prisons in regards to the early release. And, I know Rikers did get, let's say the first 1,000 out. I'm not 100% a big fan of that, and I'll tell you why, but I do respect both perspectives. It's kind of like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And we'll discuss another situation with the training academy that me and Russ discussed last week, where should we stop training or should we continue training, knowing that we're going to need the numbers?
Right.
But the same thing here, my concern is that when we're in a rush to get these inmates out, I understand why, safety concerns, whatever. Okay, and obviously I'm not going to overlook that, so I hope no one takes it the wrong way. But in the rush of the panic, one thing is we're going to overlook something. Second thing is where are they going once they get released? Are they going right back to the streets? This could be the first time they actually get real good medical care. Or if they've been sentenced, now you're rushing them into a prison that's also overwhelmed. So I would hope that at one point we develop measures within that jail just to stabilize and not push the traffic either way that may not be ready for it.
Right.
But either way, I understand. I don't want to take this the wrong way either. I understand the need to push to get out because there's going to be liability there. You're going to have, obviously inmates that could be sick or could get sick. But the potential is now, and I think one of the family members of the COs had said it best. At one point, the threat was what's coming in. But if we keep on rushing people out, the threat is now going to be what's coming out, as the numbers get greater. But hey, Russ, just to go back, I want to kind of give some real world application here. When we have, let's say, a person that's been exposed to COVID-19, okay? So someone has it. We go through all the contacts, because here's what the protocol should be, guys, by the way. If someone has COVID-19, they have to be the ones to tell you, these are the people that I interacted with, which, believe it or not, guys, one person can take out 20, 30 people easily. Supervisors, civilians, it don't matter. Russ, if you were a sergeant and you're being told right now that you're about ready to have to cut 20 of your people and send them home immediately, how much are you going to have to scramble to make sure everything's properly covered?
Oh, I would at first, my default is that we can't operate at that level. At least we can't operate safely. There's a point I think that there's a point where you have to try and assess what that actual risk is. To just go saying, well, because you walked by somebody, is that really an exposure? My default thing, of course, is that just being a sergeant, my default thinking has to go to what medical is telling me, but not just medical, what the experts are saying about this. And I have to be able to have a policy in my hands to be able to implement it. For someone to give me that responsibility and just decide that they're going to shuffle it off my direction, I wouldn't want that. But I don't think that we can just go willy-nilly and just start, sending people home because they may or may not have had contact. I don't know what the real answer is, because if we start doing that, we're simply not going to have any staff left. So I think that we, have to, buckle our seatbelts, tighten them down, and really try and figure out what the level of exposure is.
Well, we had a doctor on that said that when you have someone that has COVID and they say, okay, this is the person I talked to today, it doesn't mean that the person's symptomatic or that the symptoms or the pathogen is replicated enough for that person to be automatically contagious, at that moment. So there is maybe a little bit of a window where, there may not be such a rush to quarantine everybody at the immediate moment. That's what I'm saying. There may be still a chance to gain some order, but I promise you, all effort is going to be to get those individuals out. You have to make the effort, but you also have to balance that with safety and security, because also you could be leaving your staff vulnerable. I mean, you got a population right now that is probably on the verge of just wanting to, lose control because they're nervous, they're afraid because they're listening to the media and they're not really being properly informed. And that's where we come in as management, to balance that fear with education. But now imagine, you saw it in Yakima, Washington with that jail escape, and the females in South Dakota when they escaped from the prison, the work crew, this pandemonium that the media causes, they don't realize how it makes it harder for us to do our job. And then I'm telling you, man, Russ, in the midst of you scrambling, looking for some manpower, inmates may say, you know what, if we're going to get out of here before it kills us, this is the time to do it, because they're 25, 30 low. So we have to be strategic in how we also deliver the news that, okay, this officer has COVID. They just told us that they just dealt with 30 individuals, 75-something inmates. Now, we have to tell staff, we have to do something with the inmates, but it's how we tell them, how we get the information out, how we become strategic with that so we don't lose control, because those people that are involved, they're going to flip out. They're going to be nervous. They're going to lose a sense of control. I can understand that firsthand off the record, but yes, I can understand that firsthand. And the concern is going to be is, how do I deliver this news in a way that still gives us a level of control in the response that I'm going to get both from staff and the inmates? Now, Mark, what would be a good way to try to balance that fear where you kind of have to get those officers quarantined, but you also have to quarantine the population? So how are you going to be able to get that message across where it doesn't ignite and it doesn't leave the system vulnerable?
No, it's a great point. It's a great question, because if you don't get on top of it, the inmate rumor mill is the strongest communication device that you and I and Russ have ever experienced in our lives. It goes like wildfire, and they'll make up their own narrative. They'll make up their own story about it, and it'll be all over your jail or your prison before you get ahead of it. So that being proactive and upfront, like you said, Anthony, you got to get out there and get the message to your staff, and then deliver that message to your mates. Hey, this is what's going on. We had a confirmed case. We've got our medical staff on board. we're here to take care of this. We're going to, test as we can. And that's a huge issue. Something I brought up in the article is, let's admit it, jails and prisons on the hierarchy of who gets tested, it's not going to be real high. And we can accept that. We know that to be true. Jails and prisons are NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's never been a big priority, and inmates certainly probably are not going to be a huge priority in the grand scheme of things when this thing's all said and done. And maybe rightfully so. That's neither here nor there. But, the availability of test kits, and that's getting better every day. The government's working on it, and hopefully we catch up. But hopefully in a week or so, when test kits are a little bit more available, we should be testing our inmates. If there's a bona fide, hey, we've got someone tested positive, it was the officer who worked here for the last week. Yeah, we know you're scared. We're going to do what we can to get everybody tested and isolated if we need to, and just being really, really proactive. You brought up Russ being a sergeant making rounds. Supervisors need to get out there. It can't just be the line staff, delivering this message to the inmates. It's got to be backed up by every level of the chain of command. The wardens, the superintendents, the captains, the lieutenants. Everybody's got to be out there and being really, really proactive and get way ahead of the communication curve. Because, like I said, if you don't, the inmates will make it up, and that's what they're going to believe, and we all know that. So, another challenge.
Yeah, but I like what you mentioned, too, about the balance of information. I think at this point, the inmates are going to find out anyway what's happening.
Yep.
And I think we have to control in how that message is delivered. I think that, if we don't keep them somewhat informed, because staff better be informed. So I'm not even bringing that up. Staff's in the know. But the question would be is how much do we tell the inmates? Well, we have to realize something. If we don't give them any information, they're going to make up their own, which is going to be a lot worse than us controlling the information and giving them what's needed, educating them, and eliminate some of the fears that's been sensationalized over the news. But with that said, and going back to Russ here, you went through something similar to this in the 80s, correct? Or in the early 90s? You've had different types of pandemics, but what makes this one unique and different?
I would say the thing that makes this so different is that I believe that we're going to see a huge percentage of staff get this, and I don't mean like the 50% margins that they're talking about from CDC. I think we're going to eventually hit a margin much higher than that. The whole talk about this, flattening the curve, that's really important for us to do as far as a nation. But I don't know if that can be applied inside a correctional setting where it can be successful. The things that we're likely to see, I'm trying to be ahead of the curve here. I think that we might see a point where if we're having too many people call in sick, that we might see some crazy ideas come along, like this convalescent plasma treatment. Maybe giving that as a preventative measure to staff to keep them on their feet. This is something that's being done at some hospitals for the patients. I haven't seen it yet where it's talked about that very much in the news, but I think that's the thing you're going to start to see being talked about for both correctional facilities and probably as well for maybe some police departments. What are police departments going to do when they have, so little manpower that they can't really function effectively at all? So I think that that's something that you're going to start hearing more about in the immediate future, probably in the next couple of weeks, is this preventative convalescent plasma measure. Whether or not it can work, I don't know. I'm not a medical guy. I'm just knowing that I'm just trying to see things from a viewpoint of trying to think how they'll evolve. And that's the one thing that I've come up with so far that I think might be on the horizon.
Well, when you talked about the numbers and the strain, Scottish prison services are down a quarter of staff, 25%. Now, for some people, they think, it's 25%. They don't really know how that applies to each facility and where those mandated posts are and, how they need to get covered. I mean, 25% can cripple corrections. And as you go through this, you can see that coronavirus outbreak hits Danbury Federal Prison because federal prison's been hit pretty hard. They got a few inmates that have died already from it. It's affected North Carolina. You see California releasing mass amount of inmates right now. They're trying to get ahead of the curve. You also see, where's the other one? I had another article. Sometimes I lose it. Hold on, I'll edit this out. Talked about Central Prison employees test positive in Raleigh. So again, a Cuyahoga County jail warden resigns amid investigations while self-isolating from coronavirus. You know where this gets tough is management. And again, I'll start with Russ, and then I'll go to Mark, because I would love your answer on this. You have employees right now that even if you protect them, like first off, guys, you know what's happening across the country. Protect your employees, give them what they need, the PPEs, the screening, the preventive measures, guys. There's no excuse now if you're not doing it because it's happening. Pick up a newspaper, read it. Go to Corrections 1, see what's happening. Protect your employees. Give them some level of protection, and that will motivate them to come to work. But sometimes people do have that general fear, and you have an employee who's scared, who's upset, who's crying, and you understand their fear, you respect their fear, but then you yourself have to tell them, calm down, because you have to come in. You're essential. Russ, have you go first. How would you do that, man? You got an employee that's scared. How do you convince them to come into work at this time?
You know, this is a point where your investment in your own leadership abilities is going to pay off in a dividend, or it's not. All right. I don't know how to make it plainer. If you have gravitas, if you have people that have been willing to follow you because you've shown that you're a leader in these positions, and you can, get behind them and say, look, I know you're scared. This is the time that you have to come in. This is the time where we're going to really have to put it on the line. If you're that kind of leader, you're going to be able to motivate those people to follow you, but you can't be pushing them from behind. And you can't have just decided, well, this is a crisis. This is a good time to show leadership. The time to show leadership was in the past, so that you would have that gravitas for this moment in time.
Yeah, I like what you said. I believe that even as upper management, if you know who your good leaders are, this is about time to motivate them to kind of help us, because again, like you said it perfectly. If you led from the back, I'm sorry, man, at this time, you're going to be of no use. But if you had a warrior like yourself, Russ, that was up front constantly throughout their career, that's someone as management's going to say, hey, I need you, man, because you have the respect and you have the ability to motivate these individuals to, get to do the job. Mark, but again, same question for Russ, but how would you motivate, because the fear is realistic. Yes, there is some sensationalism, but for the most part, there's a sense of reality to that, because it's a scary threat out there. It's unknown. We don't know too much about, what can happen to us. Are we going to live through this? Are we not going to live through it? How do you motivate people that are essential to say, hey, I need you. You got to come in.
I mean, you can sit there and beat them over the head and say, hey, this is what you signed up for, but that's not going to get you very far. Just like what Russ said, we all know the dangers of corrections. We walk in that prison, we walk in that jail every day. We know it's a dangerous job, but this is different. Because it's, not many officers, thank God, knock on wood, get killed in the line of duty every year. But, this is entirely different. And like you said, Anthony, it's very scary. To echo what Russ said, you got to be out there. Your sergeants, your lieutenants, your captains, your majors, your colonels, whatever your chain of command may be, they better be out there walking that facility every single day and talking to staff on post. They better not be hiding in their offices up in admin, the better than thou type theory. That's what's going to motivate people, leading right side by side. Hopefully we can incentivize this thing. My guess would be overtime is probably where it's available is probably pretty healthy right now. So there's that monetary gain to be had by it, but yeah, at great risk. But afterwards, this is going to go away at some point in time, or it's going to diminish at some point in time. And we better celebrate those folks that were there every single day doing their job. They better be lionized. They better be heroes. They better be really, really appreciated by everybody. Right now, doctors, nurses, rightfully so, 100% the heroes of this country. But we should be right up there with them and police officers and EMTs and the firefighters that are out there every single day. It's really tough to keep motivated. But I think communication is a key. Like I said, if you're the warden of a facility, you should be out there talking to people on post every single day. Because my guess is you're probably not doing briefings or lineups right now because you're socially distancing at that point. So again, that feeds the rumor mill. Hey, they're doing this because, but if they're not seeing the leaders out front, that's not very motivating. Absolutely do the best you absolutely can as a facility administrator, as leadership, to protect your folks. And that's a really tough situation right now. We're probably going to legislate the hell out of this thing before it's all over, and we're going to be prepared for the next time. But we didn't get caught with our pants down. We just didn't see this coming and happening as fast as it did. We'll have plans for it the next time. That's another motivator. Hey, yeah, this didn't work out so well. I call on, we have hurricanes here in Florida, and back in 2004, 2004, we had 2 hurricanes within 1 week where I was working at the time. The first one, we totally screwed it up. We had our hurricane plan. We implemented it, but we had never had a hurricane before. So we thought it was a good plan on paper. It didn't work out well at all. Within a week, we adjusted it. The second time that next hurricane came within a week, it went smooth as could be. And everybody was motivated and happy. So it's just another learning opportunity for all of us in this industry. We'll get it right the next time. Sorry. It's just that, like I said before, this is a challenge that we have never seen in American corrections before. So.
Well, I want to add something too. Obviously, I'm a big fan of all law enforcement. So obviously, I'm a big fan of police. If you guys haven't followed Police One as well, they're connected with Corrections One through LexiPool. But I will say one thing, and again, guys, I'm a police fan, so don't take it the wrong way, but I got to also advocate for the profession I'm in, is that we don't have the option to limit our interaction with the population. I know that for the police, they're able to limit some interaction, not going after low-level offenses, not pulling over for everything, and really make an effort to limit their interactions with the community. But in corrections, hey, Russ, is that possible, Russ? Can we limit our interactions with the inmate population?
The things that we can do to actually limit that interaction are very small indeed. You have to be down there on the floor giving directions and maintaining order. Once you withdraw to a certain point, you're going to have lost it at that point, and then you're going to need more staff to come in and get it back under control. And then if there is an issue out there on that floor, you're going to have exposed all those staff members. So it's very limiting what you can do. You can't just abandon ship, right? Because there ain't no lifeboats.
And what's funny is we're going back to the training academy. Now, we already touched on minimal staffing, even minimal staffing of essential, cutting down on stuff that's not needed, just to kind of, the threat comes from the outside in, so you want to eliminate that threat. But we talked about training as well, and there's a bit of a catch-22 here, so I think this is a great way to try to get both your perspectives on this. That we're going to be losing staff in the masses. I mean, once you get one person that's tested positive, you could come back with 20, 30, 40. I mean, just the numbers are crazy with how many people that need to get quarantined because of the rapid spread or how fast this virus can replicate. So some people will say, well, the academy right now is a risk because, there's people, there's too many people in one area, the academy's not isolated. But with that said, if we're losing staff members in the masses, I think it's going to get to a point where we're going to need people to be fully trained. I think a lot of states should be putting some money and finding a way to isolate the academy, so we can have some people that can pick up this position. Because, again, if we run out of correctional staff, what are we going to get? National Guard? I mean, state police? I mean, you need people. A lot of people think still to this day that anybody can maintain a housing unit. They dummy down this profession that they really feel that we're replaceable, and we're not. We're not. This is not a job for anybody, and I have a feeling that when people don't take our numbers seriously and people say, okay, well, if this happens, we can have this group step in or this group step in, they don't realize how complicated this job is, that you need to have trained professionals with experienced professionals to kind of really get the job done. And I'm actually advocating that as long as we keep social distance and whatever safety measures have to be taken place. I really do believe, and I know for some people they may think it's crazy, I believe we keep an academy going because we're going to be losing numbers. But I do respect the other perspective. But Mark, you want to go first? Academy, no academy?
I've seen some instances where they're, pulling the guys and girls out of the academy early to go fill posts within a facility, and they're not trained. They haven't been through the whole academy. And there may be a fit for that in a control room type setting, indirect supervision of inmates. I wouldn't turn them loose in the housing unit. No way. They're going to get eaten alive, so to speak. But I mean, if there's a post that they can fill that can help supplant the loss of staff, the experienced staff, that might be negotiable. But it would be in those limited things such as control rooms and maybe some of the lesser duties, supervising cleaning crews and things like that, but not turning them loose on a housing unit. But you're absolutely right, Anthony. At some point in time, another potential fallout is once this thing's said and done, how many people are going to walk away from this profession?
Wow.
It's very possible. Hey, this isn't for me. I can go make more money doing X, Y, and Z, or I can do something safer. That's always been the challenge in corrections, period, is recruiting and retention. I think we're going to really face some hard times when this is all said and done. So in that respect, yeah, keep the academies going to the extent that you can. But I mean, I know most of the nation's schools have been shut down, so I'm not sure what the efficacy is of whether academies are fall into that realm or not. So it's a tough one. Like everything with this situation is, it's got so many tentacles and so many layers. And there's no one easy answer. There's not 100 easy answers.
Well, you asked a great question just now, and I want to hold that thought because I do want to answer this question that you just asked. I don't think you realized you asked it, but you asked a phenomenal question that I would love to answer. So it's in the back of my mind because I won't forget it. But I want Russ real quick to answer academy or no academy.
Oh, I'm always pro, get another academy through there. Bring on the bodies. Corrections has done a really crappy job in the past of having enough people on the front line to fill all those positions. And so they decided, you know what, we're just going to make do by causing people to have sleep deficits and a bunch of angst in their lives. So now, because of their lack of vision in plugging those holes, now it's suddenly a whole lot worse. And now, left holding the bag, as it were.
I want to jump ahead. This is related to Mark's question. I think he kind of went over without realizing how powerful of a question he just asked. Let's look at the aftermath real quick. It's something we haven't discussed before. So we get through this. We make it through. What's the likelihood that staff's going to want to remain on this job, or how do we motivate them to remain when we're said and done? I mean, right now, you got family members telling their loved ones, I want you out of this profession now. And there's some loyal staff member that says, this is what I paid to do. And it's causing a separation between them and their family. I mean, again, the sacrifice. But I want to talk about that aftermath. I mean, if we mess up now and we don't protect these employees, when we get through it all, are these employees going to want to come back? So you want to go first, Russ, and then Mark? Because that was a phenomenal question, Mark.
Yeah, I'll tackle that. And this was a little speech, a little ditty that I've written and done probably 1,000 different times, where I talk about what it's necessary to get good staff and to retain good staff. And I call it STEP, S-T-E-P, status. Everyone in this profession should have peace officer status. T is for training. Everyone should have status, training that's commensurate with that status of being a professional peace officer. E, equipment. I can't begin to tell you the number of facilities and departments that don't even have pepper spray. What are they doing? They don't have pepper spray, let alone 40 millimeter launchers and a way to take that housing unit back. Instead, they got to go wait for some SWAT team that's never been to that jail before to take it back. So STEP, and then pay, of course, right? Pay that's commensurate with all those things that we do. For the most part, all those training dollars that a lot of these departments spend because they don't pay their people enough, that's just money that's flowing down the toilet as it is. So, I always say that all the time, STEP, status, training, equipment, and pay. That's where it's at. That's what we need. That's what has to happen now, obviously.
And Mark, what's your thoughts on the question that you asked? I mean, that is just, we haven't discussed that yet. The aftermath. That's something that we're going to have to explore also in a later topic, because I actually want to kind of, review that myself. But just to touch on it, Mark, what's your thoughts? I mean, you said it.
One of the things I mentioned in the article is not only should you have a staffing plan to get you through this, you have to have a staffing plan to get you back to normal, because sometimes that's a difficult transition. If you've canceled everybody's vacation days off, all that other stuff, can you make it up to them at the end? Hey, thanks for working for the last 30 days straight. I'm going to give you 2 weeks off whether you like it or not, when healthy staff start coming back to work. So that's something to keep in the back of an administrator's mind, is how do you transition back to normal? And I mentioned it earlier, you've got to celebrate the heck out of this thing when it's all said and done. I mean, we're obviously heroes, and commendations and parties and things like that. I think it's an opportunity, and to go with what Russ said, status, that's huge in our profession. We are and always have been the stepchildren of the criminal justice realm. I mean, whether we like that or not, and I don't like it any more than you guys do, but it's always been that way. But here's an opportunity to step up and say, hey, wait a minute, when the stuff hit the fan, and I cleaned that up. When the stuff hit the fan, we were there and we got through it. And, you had pointed out earlier, police officers, they can slow their workload down if they need to. And I couldn't blame one for doing it, not at all, but we don't have that option. I really think it's an opportunity for this profession to be elevated up, higher in status when we come through this thing. And we will come through it, because I have no doubt the men and women that work in our nation's jails and prisons are some of the finest people on this planet. And they're proving it every single day right now. We've got to recognize that fact when it's all said and done. And talking about pay, Russ, if agencies are not tracking their overtime right now, which may or may not be FEMA reimbursable, but err on the side of caution. Make sure you're tracking every dime you're spending on overtime, because FEMA may come through and pay that bill for you when it's all said and done. Doesn't matter what your budget is or what your overtime budget for this year was. If it's FEMA reimbursable, that's a huge boost in the arm for an administrator, for an agency, to be able to recoup that money when all is said and done. So it should be tracked right now as we're going through this.
I think what would kind of give faith back to higher level, I'm talking about higher level, executive staff level. Like, a lot of people automatically think that their immediate management is the end all, and that's obviously not the case. I mean, ultimately it falls down to politics, believe it or not. Pressure, where the pressure is greater. I personally would sleep better at night if I knew nationally we did what the federal government did. Lock it down. Federal Bureau of Prisons has locked down, 122 of their prisons. They're still going to, like you said, increase the phone calls, stamps, do what they can to encourage a safe way of communicating with their loved ones. But at this point here, I just honestly think that the risk is so great that why don't we lock it down, motivate staff to kind of, maybe there's to be a spot where we can keep consistent staff, motivate them, pay them more, give them the hazard pay, do what you got to do. And then that will be Team A. And we have Team A there, and they just kind of have to battle 16 hours and get paid for the 8 of rest and, kind of rotate. And people will do that. And then God forbid we have to start quarantining Team A. Now we can get Team B. And again, for me, it works. And Russ mentioned, we're doing crazy things. Even, when you start, if you're working on a 2-shift schedule, it's a little different, because you have a lot of facilities that are understaffed as it is.
Right.
Really getting hit, because we were understaffed going in, and now we're going to be more understaffed. So they've done measures like go from 3 shifts to 2 shifts.
Right.
So they're going to be in a lot worse situation if their facilities start to get hit. But for those states that are getting hit now, like New York or state at that time that has proper staffing, because believe it or not, with the drop of the population at Rikers did have a really good amount of staffing, because they didn't lose officers in the release of the inmates. But now they're losing officers in droves, unfortunately. But again, it would have been great for them to, management would have said, hey, protective equipment, yes, but maybe we should keep staff consistent, because the threat is the outside in. But you're going to see staffs that are, facilities that are properly staffed may have to go from 3 shifts to 2. Kind of what they've been doing down south prior to this. But Russ, I mean, you're losing numbers in the masses. I can't see any other way to kind of balance that out, just to kind of maintain a safe and secure facility, right? I mean, you're going to have to blend the shifts.
Yeah, I think that's going to eventually be essential for a lot of places. You're going to have to run a skeleton crew on that midnight, and then you're going to have a limited number of hours that you're doing anything with those inmates out. And by all means, I don't know if there's places still trying to run program or education or anything out there, but they shouldn't be. We should be having as few people as possible crossing that security barrier to be in there. And we should be monitoring those people. And I would hope that those people will be taking it upon themselves when they're out there in the real world to practice that social distancing, to wear a face mask now, because that's the new gem of knowledge that we're being handed this week. And to try and, stay as healthy as you can to see this thing through, and then, try and also, I hope some departments are trying to come around to that realization. And I hope that there's some people out there that are trying to do some of that outside the box thinking and try and, figure out a way to stay ahead of this thing. It's very difficult. It's a real, exercise in reason.
But you would agree at this point, lock down those facilities, Russ?
Yes, absolutely. And get to that point so you can do those 12-hour shifts or whatever you're going to end up doing. Maybe a more realistic one would be just to try and only operate the prison for 8 hours a day and have 16 where you were in a skeleton crew.
Right. And I saw you shaking your head, Mark. So obviously, not in your head. So obviously you agree with the lockdown. But let me ask you a question. Why do you think it's so hard for us to make that final decision? The FBOP did it. Why can't we not do that statewide?
Yeah, ironically, I was on a call with them 2 weeks ago with the American Jail Association. They've been locked down pretty much since February, before this thing even started spreading. So they kind of got ahead of it. And up until that time, they didn't have a single case in BOP. So yeah, we're reactive. We want to do jails are kind of a community entity. We welcome our volunteers in, and our chaplains and our religious folks, and that's what we do in jails, try and keep our inmates occupied. Prisons might be a little bit different, or they might even have more of that going on. But yeah, now's not the time for any of that. The less traffic, Russ said it, the less traffic you've got coming in and out your vestibules and your security perimeter, the better off you're going to be. And the other savings is all the staff. If you've got sworn correctional officers working those posts, such as programs or education, well, now they're part of your, like you said, A or B team. They need to be integrated back into the security staff, like it or not. It's, suck it up, cupcake. This is what you got to do. We're a team. A lot of jails have huge intake staffs. That's something that's very necessary. My guess is intake might be a little bit slow these days. We talked about, maybe a slowdown. There's not a lot of people out on the streets. Yes, crime's going to continue, but maybe not, hopefully not to the level that we're used to or are normal. So you really got to be looking at that stuff at all times. Where can I plug a hole? Talk to allied agencies, talk to the county next to you, talk to the prison next to you. Or, if you're a prison and you've got a county jail in your jurisdiction, you should be talking. Maybe not, one's not hit, and maybe the other one has got a lot of cases. You can beg, borrow, and steal staff. Desperate times, desperate measures, but now is the time to be talking about that stuff, not 3 weeks from now. Or actually last week was probably a better time to be talking about it. But definitely, Russ, or you mentioned Anthony, what's the bottom line? Is the National Guard going to have to come in? And that's another topic. I was talking to my guys in Palm Beach last week. A lot of deputies, a lot of corrections officers, a lot of state prison officers are also National Guardsmen. They're reservists. So if they get called up, boom, now you're taking another staffing hit that you got to plan for, or at least be able to predict that it's coming. So, you got to be communicating with what you've got, your allied agent. Maybe you never talked to the prison down the street, but you should be right now. Hey, how are you guys? Anything we can do to help? Because we're going to probably ask you for the same help in return if we need it. So, corrections officers are corrections officer. I don't care if you work in a prison or a jail. The job's the same. The inmates might be a little bit different, but we beg, borrow, and steal from each other all the time, and now's the time to be doing that. So at least be thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that right now, there was a couple of things you mentioned before, too, about how going through this can elevate the profession. I just hope people are willing to look back and actually see what we did and not try to bastardize, because we're not going to be perfect coming out of this. We're going to be battled and scarred, but the fact is we're fighting now. And sometimes people want just to see the end result, and at the end of the day, you're not appreciating the effort that, we're losing officers left and right. And then, yes, there's some inmates too, but the point is they're coming in. These officers are coming in. These medicals coming in, food services coming in, I mean, there's a lot of people that are essential. Mental health, maintenance is coming in. We're essential because the amount of lives we deal with every day. And I know sometimes people, they may thank that first responder, and maybe sometimes corrections are lucky to be part of that. But how many people thank a food service worker that works in a prison? How many people thank a maintenance worker that works in a prison? A classification officer, they even know what that is, because they're going to be essential because it moves. Even social services could be essential because inmates have to get released, and there's paperwork now that comes with those releases, FRARA packets that are needed to make sure the inmate has proper ID and, enough to get going in life at the get-go. So, I mean, there's so many things that people may not realize are essential that people are sacrificing for. So just in all, with corrections, those that are coming in right now battling this, hats off to you, and I just wish that they would get the appreciation in the long run. And I'm also going to do something else too. There's inmates out there volunteering to clean up these areas.
Yep.
There's inmates out there volunteering to step up and help staff.
Yep.
So bravo, because now we're working together. And I hope at the end of the day through this crisis that we realize that we need each other. It's not an us first them mentality. I've never promoted that in my career. I'm sure you guys never did. We may not get along all the time, but if we could just respect each other and, what do you need, and try to move things forward. But maybe this could be a moment where, weird feeling is that maybe people will start being dependent on us that work in corrections. And maybe through that dependency, they'll open their eyes up to something that's real. And then for once, when we come back, we can hold our heads up proud and say, maybe wear a shirt that says, I survived the coronavirus, and turn around and have a picture of a prison.
Yep.
But any closing thoughts? We'll start with Mark first, then we'll go to Russ.
No, I like what you said about, the inmate cleaning crews. That's a must, and that's another thing we talked about inmate fear and concerns and stuff. If they see a stat or, a group of inmates out there scrubbing every day and wiping everything down, everybody's going to feel a little bit better, a little bit safer. I mean, because that's number one. I mean, I'm washing my hands 20, 30 times a day these days. So everybody is, that's going to make people feel better. But make sure those inmates are properly outfitted with whatever PPE you can afford them. Food service, you brought it up. Now is not the time to say any corrections officer or any nurse or any food service person in a facility. Now's not the time to say, hey, that's not my job. Because right now, anything can be anybody's job. If my food service folks banged in sick for the night shift and because, they're scared or whatever, I still got to feed my inmates. So if an officer's got to go in there and flip 200 eggs or 500 eggs, whatever, so be it. Let's get through this. Same thing with nurses. We might be short in nursing staff, and maybe officers or deputies would have to do pill pass or something along that line. Blood pressure checks, things that they could do within their training. So be it. Let's get through this together. And we really got to stick together. It's not the time for finger pointing, or, like I said, not my job. I think that's important for staff at every level to remember. Administration, we said it before, get out there, be talking to your staff, interact with them every single day. Do not hide in the ivory tower. Now is not the time for that. Russ brought it up earlier. If you're leading from the back, you better step up right now, like immediately. And I think that's going to help motivate staff coming to work. And that's really, I think, what the biggest challenge is going to be is the quarantine requirements. Let's hope and pray for a vaccine real soon. I mean, that would solve all these problems, but we don't know where we are with that. But I'm confident, this country is the greatest in the world, and we're going to come up with something. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but hopefully once this thing is over and done with, it'll never come back. I appreciate being on with you guys. I appreciate the chatter. I appreciate the opportunity to share with my brothers and sisters in corrections.
Before I get Russ's final thoughts, there's something else we forgot to thank. There's these platforms out there that release information that does provide a sense of realism and education, and Corrections One, Lexipol is part of that. They're putting information out there that is real, relevant, and stuff that we all should be reading, because again, educate yourself and information kind of it calms you down when you start realizing the truth, and a lot of the media doesn't do that. And then you have someone who is director of the content on this show. So here we are thanking us, and also we should be thanking you, because you're making sure that the right material gets out there for us to read, and then eventually, trust and believe, I read and I inform my staff, I inform the inmates based on the material that you provide, that the material that you filter through to make sure it's the right information, and also gives us recognition and respect. So at the end of the day, Mark, let me and Russ thank you for your dedication and making sure that this profession is taken out of the shadows and seen in the right amount of light. Good job.
I appreciate that. And that's a testament to the leadership at Lexipol that, we kind of shifted gears in the last 2 weeks and trying to do everything we can to get our public safety partners and local government partners all the help they can get right now. So it's been an interesting 2 weeks. It's been a great challenge. And I'm probably one of the proudest couple of weeks I've had working for Lexipol, which I'm always proud to do. So I think we really stepped up.
Well, I'm going to keep on having you come on until I become annoying. Trust me. Russ is the only one I have left. I used to have millions of people. Now it's just me and Russ and a few. Bonnie, got a few. William. Hey, Keith. I got a few. But, Mark, you're part of the family now, man.
Thank you.
Hey, Russ, any closing thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, this is an era of challenges and adversity. And the great thing about challenges and adversity is they provide opportunities. Don't squander them. This is a chance for corrections to shine. This is a chance for us to pick up all of those opportunities and forge real bonds for the future to move corrections ahead. So, let's not leave those by the wayside. There's going to be some great friendships, some great networking that's going to come out of this. And above all else, there's going to be some great stories that we're going to be able to point to. And there's going to be some of those stories that probably aren't going to be so great as well. But I think by and large, just knowing the correctional staff that I know that are out there still, and the ones that I've seen coming up through the ranks, and the ones that talk to me on all these forums, that this really is a chance for us to take those opportunities and move those goalposts and really make a big difference in corrections. So let's not squander it. Let's move ahead. There's light at the end of this tunnel already. And I can tell you that at the end of this is going to be something that we're going to be able to boast about, and we're going to be able to be proud of, and be able to look back on, and give great examples to the next generation that's not going to have had to battle through this. They'll be looking up to us.
Now, I could picture this actually going through the history books and here's us three little people just talking about it. Who knows who will recognize it down the line. And in my closing thought, I want to say something to management, something that we kind of said earlier, but just to kind of go back. And what I talk about, guys, is from experience. I wish I could tell you guys more, but I promise you in 7 years when I retire, I'll share a little bit more about my career since I'm still on the job. But with that said, we touched on something that was important to me today, which was motivating an employee that's scared to come in, because it's a scare that's real. It's logical to be afraid at this time. And I think good supervisors, there's two ways you can do it. Now, right now, there's the first way, which is not honest. The first way is telling them everything's going to be okay, and that's not honest. But some people may cave in and decide to do that, and I would disagree with that. But the other way is trying to find the courage within that individual to face that fear, because that's, who you want next to you anyway. So it's about listening to what their concerns are and then trying to find the courage within themselves to push them forward. But here's the cool thing, something that Russ said and something that Mark said. When you push for that courage, and that person decides to step up and do what's expected of them, when they look to the left and the right, they better see you. They better see you. As always, guys, the show is Teardrop. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell is going to notify you every time I post up a video, and stay safe. Now, hold on, guys. I'm pretty bad at stopping this. We can wave because it's just going to stop abruptly. Whoa.